Hey everyone, it's Jeannie, the Evolutionary Women's Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Wanted to tell you a little bit about my podcast with Arielle Schwartz. Arielle is a lovely human being. We are neighbors here in Boulder, Colorado, and our roots go back to our time at Richard Freeman's studio. I was teaching there. We talk about prenatal at Richard's studio and midwifery and how the impact of bringing our babies into the world through the beautiful guidance of the midwives and the stability that brings, as well as breastfeeding to a child and their nervous system. So we talk about trauma. That's her expertise. And our intersection with yoga and meditation and mantra and initiation into mantra and its impact on the nervous system and imprints and samskaras, as well as her expertise in polyvagal theory. So it's a wonderful dialogue. I hope we can have Arielle back on the podcast, as there's so much more to discuss around trauma and healing our nervous system and somatics. So please enjoy the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Evolutionary Women's Podcast. I'm your host, Jeannie Manchester, and I'm very delighted to welcome our guest, Dr. Arielle Schwartz. Hi, Arielle.
Hi, Jeannie. It's so good to be with you again.
We're probably waving through neighborhoods to each other.
Seriously, I see you up there up north.
Yeah, I'm in North Boulder.
Over by the Boulder Rec Center. There we are.
So we're like a mile apart or something.
Yes.
So, I was inspired because I saw you last year at the Women's Solstice gathering. And of course, I've known about your work for a while. You're a doctor, you're a psychologist, in specializing in trauma. And trauma is such a big word today, which I think is exciting because we're talking about it. Like we've got modalities of healing, perhaps in ways that weren't available. Mm-hmm. Even, I'm thinking of my parents' age, my mother's in her 90s now. We didn't have the language for it. And so, in yoga, we would say that, we keep repeating these traumatic events, lineage by lineage, because we haven't known how to address. And perhaps that's why I started yoga in my 20s, but I didn't know it, it's just.
Same. I know that I was drawn towards both yoga and then also towards somatics and body psychotherapy. Because of my own trauma, I just didn't have that language or frame for it. I just knew that I was anxious. I knew that I was experiencing some depression, and I knew that I felt better after a yoga practice.
So take us back a little bit to, where all this began, if you would, just, however much you want to share about that journey of trauma in your own, because I think that's usually the case for each of us that, me too. I was at Richard Freeman's studio in my 20s. I didn't really realize for many years that I was there for far deeper reasons than just a physical workout. You hang around Richard for long enough, you start to realize that there's a lot more to yoga, and there's a lot being revealed as you repattern, at least on the stula level, the thick level of the body, and then maybe a little bit slightly deeper to the emotional body. But take us back. Tell us how you got to this place where you're an author of 8 books or something. Like, it's pretty phenomenal, your work right now. It seems like it's really blossoming, which is thrilling to watch.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that the parts of this story that I'll share are that there was a lot of trauma in my early childhood. My parents got divorced when I was very young. It was not a amicable divorce. And so I was very much in between the two households. And then I had 2 really different households, one that felt very deeply nurturing and safe, and one that really didn't. And so, that was kind of like, that's one layer of the whole story. And I'm going to add another layer real early on here, because after my parents got divorced, my mom remarried, and she remarried a yogi, right? Like she my stepdad brought yoga into our household when I was 7. And so all of a sudden I had this access to this whole other world of connecting to my body in a way that felt really playful. And then also we traveled to the ashrams that were on the East Coast at the time. So I went to Muktananda's ashram when I was 7 years old, and we received Shaktipat in a room of hundreds of people with incense burning and dimly lit and chanting. And I got exposed to all of that very young. And some of it was a little bit like, whoa, that what is all of that? But we also went to Kripalu starting when I was 7, 8 years old. And I remember sitting in the like children's room, or the, like the place where all of the kids would go while the adults were doing all of the practices, and learning to meditate as a young child and feeling something really profound and experiencing this connection to a source of light that was a real contrast to the chaos that was happening around me at home. And I think that all of those early experiences ignited a curiosity and a felt sense of what's possible. And then fast forward, I was a teenager. I didn't want anything to do with yoga. Fast forward again, I was in college and I was 19 and I was really anxious. And a friend of mine took me to a yoga class that she was teaching. We had like student taught classes where I went to school. And I immediately dropped in, and I felt like I cried on the yoga mat, but I also felt like when I got off the yoga mat, better and less anxious and more centered, whatever words we want to use, more home, right? And I was like, I want more of that. And so I just started going back first weekly. And by the end of that year, I had a daily practice.
Yes.
Right.
There's so much packed in there. I can resonate. I found myself getting darshan with Guru Mai Chivalasananda, who, came after Muktananda, and in my 20s. And I also felt that, like, what am I doing? Everyone's having kriyas in the room. And I was like, oh my God, what is my cousin into? What has he taken me to? And then I found myself, very immersed in later on in Kashmir Shaivism, which, it's sort of, you wonder about destiny and all of this. And then also I grew up with alcoholism in my family, and it was super heartbreaking, to grow up in that. And of course, as a kid, you want to fix things, right? You want to, if I got my dad into yoga, or if I go fix some food, and, as a kid, you really just want to make everything better. So no wonder we both sort of turned to yoga teaching and and you as a therapist, because we really want to help people, we want to heal ourselves, we want to help others. So it's interesting to look at destiny sometimes, because at least through the yogic lens, it's probably beyond this lifetime, if you believe that. Like there are seeds in us that we remember, that we want to carry forward, and then of course our this lifetime's trauma is informing who we want to be and how we want to heal and how we want to help. And so I just resonate with your story, because that anxiety of not feeling at home. And then I would go into Richard's studio and I would be like, I'm home. I can hear my breath. I can feel my thoughts. These are mine. They're not my family's. And I started to resonate with that, and just wanted to keep going back to class, because, especially in Richard's studio, because it was so quiet, no music. There was some heat. We turned up the heat for Ashtangis, but it was just so quiet. And he really, kind of held that container of quiet, which I started to really yearn for. Oh, I can hear and feel. And I had many times also just like in puddles on my mat. Mm-hmm. And I realize now how much catharsis was being released just through the asana practice, really, and breath work.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know that I practiced at Richard's studio when I moved to Boulder. So I was in there too, 1996 till the early 2000s. You'll know this name, but I did all of my prenatal work with Martha,
Oh,
and I
yes.
know, right? Right? Like it was so beautiful. And so I know that studio so well. And just even the ritual of coming in and putting your shoes in those little cubbies to, to the left of the door, the right of the door, depending on your perspective of walking in that door. And so often you were really mat to mat in there. It was a very, it was a tight, small, intimate space. And the practice not only of hearing your own breath, but that the music of the room was literally the collective breath. And particularly, and then obviously other teachers too, but Richard's voice, that like one of the things that so stands out for me is the embodied transmission of his approach to teaching.
Yes. Yeah. I feel him very deeply in my teaching. I did interview him here. If anyone's interested, there's a podcast of he and Mary on here. But yeah, I told him that it's like when that imprint is so strong, that transmission is so strong, it doesn't go away. It's there with you. And you could say that is true of trauma too, right? Like we've got some good imprint and then we've got some traumatic imprints that
Exactly.
yeah. So, I was thinking about the word trauma and maybe from your perspective, what is trauma?
Yeah. I'm actually going to go with that word imprint because it's such a perfect segue into this question. Because when we look at trauma, so often we start out with like, what was the event? What happened out there? But the event is over. So now what we're talking about with post-traumatic stress is what's happening inside of you. And so literally the event imprints itself, and sometimes it imprints with image, and sometimes it imprints with certain sensory elements of the sounds that we heard or the felt experience. But more so, the imprint lives inside of the embodied experience and the nervous system. And so basically what happens is the event occurs and then it gets held within a very high arousal state within the body mind nervous system state. We get basically caught in a certain amount of vigilance or hyper arousal or sensory arousal, and that and it shapes how we breathe, it shapes the posture, it even shapes our eyes in terms of how we're perceiving the world. And then when we get reactivated into a trauma related state, the nervous system that accompanies that state is what's getting reactivated. And then all of those sensory components related to it are what we tend to feel or re experience. And I'm sharing kind of one side of the nervous system expression of trauma is basically when we get caught in high arousal states. It's a very classic post traumatic stress reaction. But when the trauma is ongoing, repeated, unremitting, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, or let's say it's a high trauma event, but we can't escape it and we perceive that it's life threatening, that there's a different expression that can happen there, which is that we get basically caught in the imprint of conditioned immobilization, or there's nothing I can do. I feel helpless and powerless to change my circumstances. And my nervous system in that place shifts away from that outward vigilance into some quality of collapse, shutdown, withdrawal, urge to isolate, and sometimes nausea, fogginess, dissociation, or even a faint response. So now we're looking at these two expressions of trauma that mirror the two primary states of our nervous system. We're either caught in the sympathetic nervous system or we're caught in this imbalanced expression of the parasympathetic, not the rest and digest version, but the collapsed and shut down version.
Yeah, wow. I just got like chills. Yeah, I mean, of course, I always think through the lens of yoga, right? So, we have this word in the Shakti Shaiva tradition of what we call the Anavamala, the little one, which apparently everybody has, this feeling of separation. So even if we don't perceive or have sort of this dramatic trauma, whatever, that even coming into a physical form, there's a feeling of separation. And the Anavamala is associated with feelings of unworthiness, of doubt, of shame, of insignificance, of being very, very small. And I kind of am seeing like, oh, maybe that's the what did you say? It's not like you're in a rest and relaxed state. You still have this trauma that's been triggered, but a very different response.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kind of feels like the Anavamala, because the Anavamala can also be associated with sort of the Kaphic quality in Ayurveda of inertia and immobility and not being able to harness yourself to life.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would say that's connected to depression or.
I love that you brought this in, because there's a really profound article that I write about in the Applied Polyvagal Theory in Yoga book that I have, and it's referencing Marlisa Sullivan's work, and you might know of her work, and she's also a yogi, and she works with Applied Polyvagal Theory, and she was one of the first people that worked with Steve Porges to look at the kind of links, and she writes in there about the gunas and some of the parallels between the different states of matter and that matter that lives in us and Purusha and Prakriti, right? So we have the tamasic and we have the rajasic and we have the sattvic. And in this case, when we're looking through that lens, that the tamas or the tamasic state, which is linked more to inertia and to in its imbalanced form is linked to stagnancy, right? That would be, again, what we would link to this parasympathetic collapse and shutdown, or this kind of stuck immobilization or condensed state. And ideally, we can embrace the tamasic state as profound stillness, and it's deeply nourishing for our well-being. Just like ideally we could rest into the parasympathetic and experience that relaxation response that's so good for our digestion and for our immune system and all of that. But if we have trauma that's shaped that into its imbalanced expression, we can get stuck there.
Wow. Yeah. And then there's this other side, right? It's kind of more maybe rajasic, a little bit more. I imagine this is kind of me in my feeling body, highly reactive, sort of in maybe emotional ways, or we're triggered, sort of like very energetically triggered. Someone says something and we immediately snap, or I don't know. You tell me.
You're spot on, right? Like we look at again, rajasic, it's neither good nor bad, right? There's a balanced and an imbalanced expression of it. And in the imbalanced expression, or sometimes the trauma imprinted expression, as soon as we feel rajasic, we go into irritability and restlessness, or quick to anger, quick to emotionally react, and more anxiety, right? Everything that can go along with feeling uprooted, ungrounded. And ideally, right, and I thought about this too, like if we think of tamasic as like the seed that's underground, right? It has all of this potential, but it's still, right? And then rajasic is that which begins to grow and emerge from that seed. And it has all of this growth potential. In the balanced expression, Rajas lets us play and laugh and lila, right? It lets us feel joy and lets us dance and all of this beautiful expression of movement in a way that doesn't lead us to feel uprooted or ungrounded. But trauma uproots us. It ungrounds us. And then the rajasic, when that shows up, it feels scary rather than, oh, okay, my heart rate's elevated. That's a sign I'm alive. I can play in that state. And so trauma recovery ultimately lets us take the stillness and reclaim that as a state of health. And it helps us reclaim movement in the context of joy. Yes. And then all of this is in service to the ultimate flowering, which would be sattva.
Yes. And that's, what my experience has been. As a child, I'm an alcoholic with some, I would say probably both those extremes at times. that through my daily regularity, I meditate twice a day. And I started really kind of late, really. I was a yogi in my 20s, but I didn't really seriously commit to meditation until my 40s. So, and then at that time, I was experiencing perimenopausal headaches, and I could, walk about the world, but as a yogi, I was sort of faking it because I didn't feel very good. Once a month for 4 days, I would feel terrible.
My story, Jeannie. I mean, I literally everything you said verbatim.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, perimenopausal headaches that started in my 40s, and also what prompted me to begin a daily meditation practice twice a day.
Well, and when I did, I mean, I can feel like the mystic has always been in me. I can feel that since I was little. However, it was sort of the drive to feel better. I was like, okay, it's time to get serious about meditation. And when I did, and when I met Paul Muller Ortega and I got initiated into mantra, I was telling you, like, it's not just one mantra, it's like consecutive mantras that have to break into the subtle field. But I would say within 3 months, and I never make health claims because the Shakti, the energy of consciousness works on us in different ways. We have different karma. Who knows? But for me, within 3 months of daily regularity, and this was literally, I jumped in and I was like, I'm committing to twice a day. And I had kids in high school, middle school. So it wasn't like easy, but I was like, I am committed. And literally around the 3rd month of daily regularity, I could palpably feel my system was more sattvic. I felt like, oh my gosh, knock on wood, right? Or cork I have here in the studio. I don't think I'm getting headaches anymore. And to this day, I have never had a hormonal headache again. I will get certainly tension headaches, but it was so profound that I was like, there's no turning back because Richard had been coaching us for years, like, meditation, 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 meditation. But I was raising kids. I was young. I was like, oh gosh, my meditation is my children or, being in the world. And it wasn't until I met Paul and I started to really dive in and then experience what true sattva is. And then to see that I was healing. And then I was like, okay. I am sold on so many levels because I feel better.
Right.
Feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get to reclaim our health. It is amazing.
It is amazing. And what I started to see, Arielle, I think you will find this, as a therapist, that we call it standing on the ledge of freedom. Like, I was like, wow, I feel like I'm reacting like I used to. I'm like, my body's not reacting. I'm not emotionally reacting in the same way. And even if I have a reaction, I have witness consciousness now. I'm like, oh, you are in reaction. Mm-hmm. How interesting. And so we get this opportunity to decide.
Yeah.
Do I want to react or what would be the appropriate response in this situation? And maybe reaction has an appropriate time, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
There's an appropriate time when you need to be safe, or I'm sure you have lots of examples of that. But that was really another turning point for me. Was wow, I'm not reacting like I used to.
Beautiful.
And I would use that word sattva, which to our listeners, to just this ability to stand before your emotions and to feel more of a peacefulness inside, even though maybe these things want to play out. You're like, wow, look at that. And so that ledge of freedom is giving us a choice to react or to create a new, we say vasanas for liberation, a new pathway that creates a new reality. For each of us. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, but
I do. I mean, I'm going to go back to this applied polyvagal theory in yoga and kind of speak a little bit about the science around sattva, right?
So maybe describe polyvagal for those that don't understand.
Yes, I'm going there. So, polyvagal theory is referring to poly, meaning multiple, and vagal referring to the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is your 10th cranial nerve, and it gets called vagus because it's a widely traveled path in your body. And unlike other cranial nerves that stay primarily centered around your head and your cranium and your skull and your eyes, ears, mouth, the vagus nerve works with all of those cranial nerves, but moves downward. It descends into your throat, your larynx and pharynx, into your heart, your lungs, and all of your digestive organs and your reproductive organs. It works with the fascia of your entire body. It gathers data from what it feels like to be you, everything from helping to regulate your body temperature and your respiratory rate and your heart rate and your digestive rhythms and your sleep-wake cycles. So really important. So important for hormonal balance, important for the functioning of your thyroid and your adrenals and your gonads, everything, right? So it's an amazing nerve circuit. And poly, meaning multiple vagal circuits, basically says that we've got an upper nerve circuit, an upper vagal circuit that is moving into the sense organs, works with those other cranial nerves to help us process what we see, what we hear, what we feel in the feeling of our face, how we express through our voice tone. And it's everything that's above the diaphragm. And what's important about this is that this upper vagal circuit is helping us determine cues of safety, especially relational safety, that help us rest in closeness to other people. So if we kind of look at the origin story of this ventral vagal circuit, that's the name for this vagal circuit, it's very much about bonding and attachment. And for an infant to be in proximity or in closeness to the caretaker, that's what allows an infant to go into stillness or stop being so wiggly so that the infant can nurse and bond and gaze and sleep in the arms of the mother or the primary caretaker, right? So we ultimately use this upper circuit to help us determine a sense of safe enough to rest in stillness, safe enough to be in closeness. But this upper vagal circuit can also it's a very flexible circuit. And it also is the very thing that lets me go, I'm safe enough to play. I'm safe enough to climb up Sanitas today for our Boulder friends, right? I'm safe enough to dance my Zumba class, whatever your thing is, right? So it lets us basically move into the world with this really robust sense of safe enough and connected enough to be me in the world. We have a second vagal circuit, and the second vagal circuit is what we call the dorsal vagal circuit. And the dorsal vagus is that of the vagus nerve that then descends below your diaphragm. So it goes down into all of your digestive organs and the reproductive organs. And when we receive all of those cues of safety from the upper vagal circuit, the lower vagal circuit goes rest and digest, golden relaxation response, healing zone, and it's deeply beneficial for meditation and for yoga nidra and for all of the stillness practices that are used for our healing benefits, But that same dorsal vagus can take us into that shutdown or that collapse or nausea or heaviness or contraction, whatever it is, when the upper vagus determines that there's a threat out there. So sometimes that upper vagus goes, threat, I'm going to go into fight flight, or threat with no escape, I'm going to go into shutdown collapse. So there's your primer on polyvagal theory. Yeah. And coming back to sattva, right? When we look at the qualities associated with that sensing of safety, what begins to happen with the ventral vagal circuit when we are safe enough, when we are connected to enough, is that it's going to facilitate this optimal state of nervous system coherence is usually the word we use, or resonance or flow state. But basically we go into this optimal vagal tone that allows us to have this beautiful rhythm between our sympathetic and our parasympathetic branches. So in yoga, for example, when we do something like alternate nostril pranayama, we are working the two primary channels. Those channels are also sympathetic and parasympathetic, right? And we're basically cultivating this optimal vagal tone that allows us to come into Sushumna, allows us to come into central channel balance sattva.
So beautiful. I love the dialogue. I was thinking about breastfeeding and how I had such great Boulder midwives ushering me into motherhood.
Yeah.
And, it felt very natural for me. And I know, some people that are listening, maybe you didn't have the opportunity to breastfeed. And I so honor that not all of us could choose that. And, for some reason, I was able to birth my babies at home and nurse them. And I feel really good that they got that because, not all of us got breastfed. And not to go back into that shame cycle because we are where we are. However, mamas to be, the breastfeeding is right essential for that secure bonding.
Yeah.
Initially.
Yeah, it's interesting. If we want to stay on that topic of childbirth and bonding and so on and feeling of safety. So we also worked with midwives. I worked with the Jennifers who, we had different groupings of midwives in Boulder. I worked with Jennifer Brown, Jennifer Dossett, and yeah, I'm curious who you worked with too, but so in that journey, one of the reasons why my husband and I chose to go that route of working with midwives and doing a home birth, and we had our children in water and so on and so forth, was actually initially I was going the traditional route. And this is nothing against the traditional OBGYN route. Like there can be really, really good supportive people in either camp of the traditional or the midwife camp. It just so happened, and maybe again, like the exact right circumstances that sent me into the arms of the midwife community, but I had a really negative experience with my first OBGYN. And I also suffered from hyperemesis. So I was very, very nauseous in my first pregnancy, and I threw up and threw up and threw up. And so I would go to the OBGYN who had kind of a gruff bedside manner and just not attuned, and my body didn't feel safe. And I would walk out of appointments and I would immediately throw up. And my husband came with me to one of these appointments and he goes, no, we can't work with her. Like it was such a clear, my body knew that I was not going to relax in the presence of her nervous system and her body language and her voice tone and her abruptness. And eventually through just a kind of chain of events took us down the route of working with our midwives. And the opposite was true there. Like I immediately felt safe. My nausea was lower. I was able to put weight back on. I'd lost 20 pounds in my first trimester, right? Like I was able to put the weight back on. I knew that I would be able to relax enough to give birth in their presence, right? So we have to really listen to the way that our body is a feedback system about what safety feels like.
That is so beautiful. I know I hate Elizabeth Moore.
I had a feeling in Ursula, yeah. Amazing team, right?
Yeah, just incredible.
Second, no, it was Flame. It was Flame.
Flame was there.
Yeah, Flame.
Yeah. I barely needed them. The second one came so fast, but it was incredible to have their support, their understanding of postpartum and care and
huge.
I mean, I look back and I think, wow, I may have done this quite differently. And being a little bit of a, Boulder athlete, they were like, no, not for 6-8 weeks, and I was like, wow, that's a long time. And then being in that process of nurturing the baby for those weeks, I thought, oh my gosh, I would have it no other way. This is so precious. And also for our body's recovery, that we're not just, speeding back into life. So it's like also part of a calm nervous system and nourishment that will last a lifetime.
Yes, yes. Even like simple things. And again, this goes into such feminine wisdom. But I remember, in fact, I had gone to Elizabeth's house as I was interviewing midwives. And the first thing she did is she made me some raspberry leaf and oat straw tea, right? And that feeling of like being with another woman who makes you tea and makes eye contact and voice tone and facial expression, like all of those ways in which we promote the felt sense of safety. And there's been some beautiful work in the childbirth field with applied polyvagal theory and how it helps promote less complicated birth when we feel safe. Again, no matter where you are, whether you choose hospital or home, the bottom line is that you feel safe in your body, in your environment, and with your providers.
It was so beautiful. I love that tangent.
Yeah, me too. And also, like, along with it, it goes back to, what did you call it? The freedom,
Edge of freedom.
the edge of freedom, because in trauma recovery, what we speak about is the incredible importance of feeling like you have a sense of choice, right? And that's what we would call that's what we would refer to in this edge of freedom, is that you have a sense of choice about what shape you want to be in your body, what you want to pay attention to, how you're breathing, how you're moving, right? And so when we translate this back into just a general yoga class, for example, right, a trauma-informed approach to yoga teaching is that it's all a practice in making choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting, just from my perspective as a deep meditator, what I've noticed is, as we would call, as the vibratory rate is being raised, by the mantras go in and they start to dislodge, we call fragmentation or feelings of separation. Those are memories in the deepest subtle, it's hard to access those memories beyond the body. Of course, like, I'm an asana teacher. I believe in asana for repatterning on the physical level, and then slightly deeper with the pranayama. But even in yogic terms, we know that there are deeper levels. So what I've been really kind of stunned by is that these mantras, because they're alive, they're vibratory, sort of like a vibratory toothbrush, right? That they go in and they start to dislodge memory and energetic memory, right? Like, all the memories, as we spoke about, are lodged in the subtle field. So then how do you actually get to those memories? And I've done lots of therapy, which has been in my life, especially in my 20s, incredible work. And then, this work with the mantra has been like unbelievable. Not that you wouldn't want therapy with that. There are certain times in my practice over the years where I've been like, I think I'm going to go to therapy, talk this through and understand what's actually transpiring. And what's really cool is that when you continue to do this, the mantras start to disclose the subtle body and all kinds of things come up. And a lot of times I don't know what those are. Fatigue can be one. And of course, emotions can certainly arise, like, crying. Or even this week when I was on a retreat, I walked by my kids' school and I started to cry, and I was like, I just want to go back to an innocent time. And then I realized that I was in purification. That, in yoga, in mantra practice, we would say there's purification going on. And it was like, okay, is that really true? And I was like, no, just having a moment of memory being released. And so returning to the present moment, was my balm. Was like, okay, we're not going back to that time that was sweet, or appeared to be sweet in my memory. As I was struggling with something now, right? Like, something was purifying, and I don't exactly know what that was. And in mantra practice, we would say you don't really have to know. It's sort of like dirty water going down the drain. But I'm curious, in your work, how do you get into the deep, deep, subtle realms of memory?
Yeah, it's actually such a beautiful question, and it's something that I've been studying for many, many years. It's why, for me, I was very much drawn to somatic work rather than cognitive therapies, because I knew that there was a deeper layer that we could get into. And when we're looking at how we drop down into the kind of flushing out of those earliest wounds, as you speak about, like the wound of separation, or the wound of rejection, or the wound of it's not safe for me to exist, right? Like let's imagine coming into the world in pregnancy, where the mother's body felt was traumatized or was unsafe herself. And that can be internalized or received or imprinted in the nervous system of my existence isn't safe. And so on and so forth. And so we can kind of look at those earliest imprints, and then the work becomes about slowing down and really noticing the subtleties. And the subtleties sit beneath the story that we're telling, and they even sit sometimes beneath the emotional response to what we're experiencing. And we have to go into the pure soma, that doesn't require a story. As you said, sometimes we don't know, but it's not uncommon for layers of nausea to come out, for layers of shame, for experiences of not deserving, for moments of tension to come up in awareness and then to pass through. And so we're going to kind of watch these waves of somatic experience rise and fall. And we have enough grounding of safety in the therapeutic relationship and in the environment that we basically just trust the emotional wave, or we trust that somatic wave when it comes. Sometimes it's just like a wave of dizziness that comes through. But I think because I work at that level, it's very common that in my work, we'll see themes around pre-perinatal imprints, or really, really early learnings that are pre-verbal. And those get to kind of find their way through to hopefully more completion or a sense of resolution. And as those resolve, it actually frees us up to feel more like I can live in the present now.
Yeah, and I'm kind of, again through the yogic mantra lens of as the mantra goes in and kind of dislodges the memory banks, if you will, it is giving us access to so much energy that begins to filter out through the senses. And that's where we would say our sequences, just like the tree in your backyard has a sequence to become the oak tree, for example, or, not right now, but, the daffodils in the spring, you plant them, the bulbs now, and then they start to flourish because it's the daffodil, right? It has a certain look to it, right? It has a certain sequence. And we have sequences too, according to yoga. And so, but those sequences get blocked, fragmented, we even say petrified, because of the trauma and the memories, particularly the negative memories. But even a good memory that we hang on to, right, doesn't serve. Like my kid's school thing, it's like, teeny honey, like that time is gone. You can cherish it, but to try to pull it back right now is just going to cause suffering. So, but what we say is that energy gets freed to move through the senses freely, rather than to be blocked by the trauma that wants to kind of act through us, rather than the potential. And that's where I see evolution, right? Like we're at a really incredible time on this planet.
It's so true. It's so interesting because I'm going to go back to the applied polyvagal work for a moment, because so often when we're looking at just keeping track of time, we're good.
Yes, no,
So we both just did it. But like so often when we're looking at the vagus nerve and the imbalanced, or sometimes we call it dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, or dysautonomia, but that like when we're stuck in those states, the river is not able to totally flow through us. Like we're not able to really sense what's happening in the body, and therefore the brain can't do an optimal job regulating our systems. And so we want to work with optimizing the channel, or opening up the mind-body circuit so that our nervous system can do an optimal job helping us navigate our way through the present moment. So, for example, the nervous system is meant to be very fast acting, right? Like it's, I give this example, but it'll be relevant. Like if you think about a rabbit that's, making its way through North Boulder and it hears a little rustle in the leaves and it doesn't know if it's a coyote or if it's a fox, right? The rabbit's going to go into a freeze response and assess the situation. Out from under the leaves comes a mouse. Okay, I'm not in danger. The rabbit shakes that off and off it goes doing rabbit things. Very quickly, the rabbit nervous system assesses threat and recovers from a threat. But what happens with post-traumatic stress is that we're stuck in threat reactivity and we haven't made our way back to the present moment. So we're stuck looping in the scar of the past, right? In the wound of the past. And so, as we unwind from those states and unwind those states from our nervous system, we're reclaiming nervous system flexibility, the ability to quickly assess, respond, know if we're safe, take action if we're not, and recover.
And that seems to be connected to the Ledge of Freedom and Sattva, because if we don't have an ability to reclaim that sattvic state, right, kind of almost in the moment, then that looping can continue, right? So if we're training, which is why I love the yogic path, and the meditation has been the kicker for me, because I can assess in a moment, even at the kids' school, which seems like a really benign example, but it was a moment of like, oh, look at that, It's almost like I wanted to escape the moment because I was struggling, right? I had some purification, but I was able to calmly say, "Oh, here in purification," right? And then it was like, okay, you're not going to really go back to those times, that. Like cherish them for sure. And also, those times were also full of ignorance in a way, not knowing what I know now. So I think it's going back to that sattva and the ledge of freedom, being able to choose to respond rather than react, and that is based on a nervous system.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh, this is not long enough. I feel like we're gonna have to you back on because there's so much I want to talk to you about, just about like family and lineage and trauma and cutting to the chase. And I feel like as we move into these times of Sandhya times, as we call them in yoga, between the Kali Yuga and the Sat Yuga, and this opportunity to heal our trauma seems significant in a global way. Just to end here, maybe with a comment, coming off retreat, we were studying Abhinavagupta's words of 1,000 years ago. And one thing that really stuck out was that even one person in that retreat center, in the setting of this retreat, that had a negative thought or impact would impact the entire community. So I kind of walked back into my, meditation going, no, I'm not going to animate any of that because I feel responsible for a group. Right? My experience of trauma is, if I impart that into this group, is impacting everybody. Yeah. So I wonder if you have any sort of last comments on.
I do. And I think it's a really important distinction between allowing grief to move through us, allowing ourselves to have a moment of shame or hopelessness or fear as a normal human response. And I think actually taking self-responsibility and feeling what's true for us is deeply healing for the collective. So it's not about having this negative experience and somehow like I've harmed the collective because I had a difficult emotion. I think where it gets sticky is I project and I solidify that painful emotional experience, and I actually don't take self-responsibility. I don't let myself feel it, and therefore I'm going to actually ask all of you to feel it on my behalf. And that's where the world gets really, I think, negatively impacted, it's not from the people that are actually willing to sit with their pain and let that move through like a wave. It's the ones that don't want to feel it and actually put it out there.
That's a great distinction,
Yeah.
right? We do want to feel our grief. We do want to be human. We do want to shed our tears. And, for me, it was like, okay, let that move through you, experience it, and then move on.
Exactly. But you let yourself feel it. Like that was the moment of self-responsibility of being like, I just touched some grief of missing the days that I, at least in my memory, were simpler. And I noticed how that was pulling me away from grieving also what's happening right now and being with the pain of what's happening right now. But you brought yourself back, and that's powerful, right?
I mean, yeah, I was, in the middle of the retreat. It was a powerful moment, though. It was simple but very powerful. And I am looking at our time, and I know you have to be somewhere. And I just want to say thank you for taking this time with us. And then, so could our listeners, where would they go to find you?
Great. You can find me at Dr. Arielle Schwartz. And literally, I just mean like Google Dr. Arielle Schwartz. But beyond that, my website, I have two of them. One is drarielleschwartz.com. The other is resilienceinformedtherapy.com. I run events. I run retreats. I have a retreat coming up in May to South Africa. That's a nervous system healing retreat combined with safari. Like I cannot plug that one enough because it's amazing. We just have a few spots left. And I have lots of online programs and other in-person programs. And it would be just great to hear how this podcast and this interview landed for all of you. So let us know.
Thank you so much, Arielle. And maybe we can get that hike in.
I would love that. We will.
Love nature. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Be in touch.
We will.
Any blessings.